Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. It's me, the busiest nerd on the internet. With me, as always, it's our Dynasty captain, Jeff Bell. And then, as promised or forewarned, depending if you like him or love him, we have Hutchinson Brown. And we're doing our usual Tuesday show, Who Pooped the Bed and Who Didn't, or also known as Dynasty Risers and Fallers. We're going to talk about a big one. Jeff, we've talked about this guy a lot. We've had our ups, we have our downs. It feels like the up is for real. I've been the biggest Saints hater since Sean Payton got there. I think he's going to keep his job and they look all right. Bo Nix, baby. QB1 in Dynasty. I've got to go back. I haven't messed and tinkered with the old rankings in a minute besides our wide receivers, but like he deserves to be bumped up. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. He looks in control. He looks like the game is moving slow for him. He looks really good. The last couple of games certainly are great matchups. Playing Carolina, and we saw a big game that game, and then the Saints before that. But he did it, and so that's I think the biggest thing there. And it's come a long way from playing the Steelers early in the season when they were laughing at the playbook that he was allowed to run in the middle of the game, and so. Yeah, now this is exactly what you want to see. And this is the profile for players who have succeeded. He's played a lot of college football, very experienced in that regard. He's very accurate. He's a fast processor. He's athletic enough to move the pocket, really athletic enough to scramble and gain some yards there. So that's kind of what you want to see. And it's really clicking, especially considering the really lack of options for him, the lack of skill talent around him.
Jagger, you're out.
Hutch, what do you think about old Bo Nix here? I mean, he's for real. I don't know if you're on the show. Well, we were already kind of saying that Bo Nix was is he looking better than Pat Mahomes? I mean, we had Pat Mahomes had his pop game, but I mean that rushing floor means a lot.
It does, yeah. I recently saw a tweet from Dave Kluge that was highlighting Bo Nix that I believe what he said was there were only two quarterbacks in the last 4 weeks that have outscored Bo Nix. I might not be 100% accurate there, but shout out to Dave. Nix has been really good for fantasy when you look at the last handful of games. And I love what you say, Jeff, about the lack of receiving weapons. I think it's similar to Drake May in the way where it's forced him to play smart. It's forced him to not rely on one single option and actually try to spread the football around and play like really good football, not having that dominant number one receiving core, not having that crazy powerful receiving, those receiving threats around you. It forces you to play smart and forces you to really challenge yourself. And Bo Nix is stepping up to that really, really well. And like you guys both have mentioned, the rushing, it works. He is doing really, really well in fantasy because of that rushing upside, and he looks better and better as a passer. I think in Dynasty, he should definitely be approaching, top 15-ish conversations for sure.
And I'd argue that he has worse weapons than Drake May has, and that says a lot because I think it's bad. If you really think about it, they're playing with 3 tight ends and then a combination of Jerry Jeudy and Troy Franklin. Devon Vele is like a move tight end essentially that they're rolling out wide. And then you have Lucas Kroll and Greg Dulcich is on the roster. I don't know what he's doing. I think he gets a snap every now and then, but
he's benched, so he's behind because they're running Troutman, then they're running Nate Atkins.
Oh yeah, Troutman
H-back. So
yeah, they're running like a big package every snap. I feel like so I think that's that much more impressive, and it really fits the profile. I know you said this pre-draft, and I've said the same things. He's had a lot of tools. It's just being in the right position to put it together. And I never thought that Bo Nix was as terrible as a prospect as everyone said from where he was drafted. I just didn't have a lot of faith in Sean Payton, and it feels like Sean Payton is putting it together. I know I recently mocked Luther Burden to go there, like someone like that. If you get Bo Nix a weapon, we really could see something special in Denver, and then we can actually have some excitement. As someone who lives in Colorado, I really need this. I don't care about the Broncos, but I do care about all my upset friends all the time, drunkenly talking about how bad the Broncos are. So, guys, if you can get him for cheap, if there's someone who still has the, I would say they're just behind the 8 ball and they still have the memory of the first couple of games, you can go out and get them. And I guess I asked the real question. Jeff, are you at the point where you would trade Patrick Mahomes in Dynasty for Bo Nix, or would you still like Bo Nix plus, not straight across?
I mean, it'd have to be a serious plus. It would have to be a
Seriously.
meaningful young wide receiver or a first and then maybe something too. But before I would even consider that, but I don't know. I'm still a sucker for. I believe Patrick Mahomes is pretty good at football.
I mean, I agree. It's nothing. I've never said it's nothing about real football. It has to do with just how you score fantasy points. So I'll ask you an easier question then. Would you take Drake May or Bo Nix?
Right now, I would still take Drake May. I think leaning towards maybe a higher end profile on that, but it's fair. It's a really good conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
you're definitely taking Bo Nix above Michael Penix, right? You're that's
Yeah,
definitely
I'm not.
happening.
Yeah, you're taking the bird in the hand, and like again, when
I
it
want
comes to
Drake. I
fan,
want to ask you one. Anthony
Mhm.
Richardson, your guy, or Bo Nix?
For
Oh,
Bo Nix, I would take Bo Nix at this point. I mean,
yeah.
that's what I I read an interesting article, and this is one of like we talked pre-show about watching games. The Colts are something that I want to put eyes on myself, but a lot of people are having complaints about Shane Steichen at this point because a lot of the things that we saw early they're not doing. They're not letting him run. As much as I complain about taking away half the field for some quarterbacks, with Anthony Richardson, you should really be doing that, and they're not. And if you look about how Jalen Hurts progressed, they really put the training wheels on him, and I don't think they're doing him justice by taking him off this early. So I would take Bo Nix right now. The real answer is no one's going to give me Bo Nix if they know any better, unless they are just like super rebuilders. With that being said, I think that's depending on what the plus would be, I would take Bo Nix I would if I'm a rebuilder, I would trade Bo Nix for Anthony Richardson plus, depending on what that plus is to give you context. But if I am ranking them, I would be irresponsible to put Anthony Richardson ahead of Bo Nix, even though I am a fanboy. So with that being said, Jagger's therapy on a prospect aside, it's time to pay some bills. As always, if you like and enjoy this content, hit that like and subscribe button. And most importantly, on our audio side, we have some other things cooking. We have no decisions made, but it is cooking and it will happen at some point. Go ahead and leave 5 stars. Tell us how great Jeff is. Tell us how terrible Hutch is, and we should never bring him back again. As long as you give us 5 stars. And then go over to footballguys.com/plans where we have all kinds of fun articles for you. I just dropped a massive 60 prospect big board, not just Superflex, everyone, and then did a mock draft. Jeff, what you got working on? What are you working on right now?
Same old man. We do the Tuesday or the Monday roundup. That it's Monday when we're recording this, so that is available for Week 8 to run you through all of the Week 8 action. The DFS show, the Dynasty show, obviously with Jagger. The Sunday start sit with Jagger. The Dave Kluge and I do the Friday injury report. We do the Dynasty roundtables and the Dynasty movement that both of you guys have been so gracious to help with, and that's really kind of and then waivers of the future too. So a lot of different things.
Jeff is the busiest full-time employee that we have. So
Try.
if there's anything you should do is go read all Jeff's stuff. Anyway, we'll
100%.
jump right back to it. He's made the poo-poo list twice now. And now it's for real Shadow Realm time, I think, for Dontayvion Wicks. Do you think, Jeff, it's time? Like, let's give that dream up? Because it seems that Romeo Dobbs has become the other guy. Like, there's Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed had like a down game. And I think a big play got called back. But Jaden Reed's the guy. But I think Dobbs is the other guy.
Yeah, and Christian Watson is getting healthier. He had his highest snap share percentage this past week, so he's kind of clicking there. They've obviously had Luke Musgrave out, and that's allowed Tucker Kraft to really grab that tight end position and run with it. I would say that I don't know that anything's changed with Dontayvion Wicks. It's just that we had a window where Watson was hurt and Dubs missed a week, and Wicks was able to pop off in that. It's just that there's this level of excitement and anticipation and certain segments of the audience that really love Dontayvion Wicks. And so getting that glimpse caused people to kind of go head over their heels. I saw in Keep Trade Cut, he was wide receiver 59 at the end of September, had kind of one big game and was wide receiver 41 in Dynasty. To me, like a player probably shouldn't jump 20 spots off of 1 week, especially like in that range. But I think that this is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing why he's been the wide receiver 4 for the Packers. He's a backup wide receiver for the Packers who is probably, maybe arguably the best backup wide receiver in the NFL.
say he's a super handcuff at this point. He reminds me of Josh Palmer, kind of what he was with the Chargers. When someone's out, you like Dontayvion Wicks, but for the most part, you can't have Dontayvion Wicks in your top 40, like Jeff was saying.
Mhm.
It's not very good. Hutch, where are you with the Packers right now? I think we all agree that Dontayvion Wicks there's no Wicks season. That season is whenever someone's hurt and we're sad. So do you believe in Dubs now? And with that being said, do you think Dubs is the guy, or do you think Christian Watson's going to come back and then kind of just be a problem for everyone but Reed?
I mean, I when you brought up Joshua Palmer, I thought it was interesting. I was actually thinking Juwan Jennings, like backup wide
It's the
receiver
same
that
thing. Yeah.
same similar kind of story where
Yeah.
when their starters out, this guy could be really good, but he's not needed when the starters are there. That's Felix. That's what Dontayvion Wicks is, like you guys said. And I think the problem is this Packers receiving room, like we saw in the offseason where Matt LaFleur he said he wanted to throw up when a reporter asked who his wide receiver one is. Like this Packers receiving room has proven to be, when all of them are healthy, like Jaden Reed's the number one, but it's still inconsistent through the entirety of the receiving room in terms of target share. Like you see guys jumping in every week, 6 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets between all of them, and they're just all flowing around. And it's really difficult to trust them on a week-to-week basis. Jaden Reed's been doing really well because he scored some touchdowns and he's had really, really high efficiency on his receptions. But if my memory serves me correctly, I think he only has 2 games with 5 or more catches this year. If my memory serves me correctly, like his Packers receiving room is just really tough to trust in general because they use all their weapons. And also they have Tucker Kraft, like Jeff was mentioning. So for me, Jaden Reed's really good. He's a very, very good player, but the volume's going to be inconsistent everywhere with this receiving room. So it's hard to trust all of them.
Yeah, and not just because of their offense and where Matt LaFleur comes from, but to me this is not just this is just indicative of a good offense with lots of weapons.
Yeah.
If you're like the Lions, the Packers, the 49ers, even the Buccaneers at this point, if you've got dudes, you just need to be happy that you have a good offense and accept the variance. Every week I'm going to put Jaden Reed in my in
Yep.
my lineup, and I'm going to be thrilled when he has a big pop game and be like, oh, I'm disappointed. It's Romeo Dubs week, or it's Tucker Craft day or something, and move on. Because this is fantasy football.
That's exactly the way to view it. You're exactly right there. And I think it colors so many times, like when we're getting asked start sit questions and not having really the context on your leagues. And so we play in a lot of dynasty leagues where you're starting 10 or 11 players weekly. And when you're in
Yep.
that type of format, you're just going to play one of these guys. You're going to play Romeo Dubs and you're going to live with the ups and downs. Now, when you're talking about maybe like your standard home league where you're starting 2 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers plus a flex, then that's where you're probably going to be a lot more frustrated with these Packers wide receivers. And that's where, like, I probably would take the stance of grabbing Jaden Reed, who I believe is the best option. If it really breaks out that he's going to be a guy that I can put in my lineup weekly, I'm thrilled. If not, that's where I look to pivot, probably in those shallower bench, shallower starting spot type leagues, and kind of leave myself not having the potential headache for Romeo Dubs. It's one thing to put Romeo Dubs in your lineup weekly when you're starting 11 players, something else when you're starting 5.
Yeah, especially since all 3 of us, we've done the start sit show at this point, and we
Yeah.
understand those questions that come along. That's why it's almost even more important to consolidate and trade up and not settle to where everyone's just like, well, I have Justin Jefferson. Cool. It'd be cool. A Jamar Chase, like where you really don't have to worry. And you know that those targets are going to be hyper funneled to these players with those shallower benches. But like Jeff said, if you're in the leagues like, the 3 of us are in where you're playing all these rosters, I'm not questioning if I'm going to start Romeo Dubs or not in most weeks, unless I just have that luxury. And in most cases, I do not. Next, we got to talk about Trevor Lawrence. I saw an interesting post about him where I think we have to separate the next Andrew Luck from our brains and accept that, at least for fantasy, that he is an elite-ish asset. And I mean an asset, not so much a quarterback. And I think now's the time that you can buy him, where we've seen what this offense can be and its potential, and we're seeing that come into fruition. But other people aren't willing to believe it because he's disappointed so much. I know Christian Kirk is gone, but most of us, at least I know that Jeff has been saying it, we expected him to be off that roster anyway. Brian Thomas is a guy. Evan Ingram is a solid player. And then the third guy, Parker, Washington, whatever, just they can make it happen in the aggregate or something like that. Jeff, do you still think that there's an open buy window for Trevor Lawrence? And then what do you think would be his cost to go and get him?
Yeah, I think there absolutely is a buy window, especially he just lost his top 3 wide receivers potentially. We
Yeah.
saw it sounds like Brian Thomas Jr. will be out a couple weeks. It sounds like Christian Kirk's season is over. And Gabe Davis, I thought I saw an injury tag on him as well. I don't know the
Gabe
severity of that
Davis.
injury.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you lose your top 3 options. We know what the narrative is going to be. And it's funny that you talked about Patrick Mahomes, and maybe in my mind, I'm not willing to divorce the Patrick Mahomes elite fantasy asset that I've seen in the past from thinking he's like a quarterback 15 type guy. I almost have the inverse on maybe what you're talking about with Trevor Lawrence, where I've been happily grabbing Trevor Lawrence and like he's been like top 12 quarterback most seasons. And then I see the conversation about him. Well, he's not any good and whatever else. And man, he scored me fantasy points. I don't know about you, but that's kind of the view that I've had on Lawrence. And so what price would I pay for him? I mean, if I could trade, what are you talking about? Like a first and like a random player maybe for Trevor Lawrence, or a first and like a older or contingent quarterback potentially, like I would probably do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So Hutch, over to you. What do you think about the rest of the season for the Jaguars as far as like a fantasy assets? Because like now when you think that Brian Thomas is going to be out and the Christian Kirk is going to be the Evan Ingram, slant dump off tight end screen show. Is it just kind of you want all the Jags now? Because personally, I'm moving forward with the idea that Doug Peterson and Trent Balk aren't going to be there. And then maybe Travis Etienne is going to be there as well. So all these pieces I think are good individually, and I just want to buy them up regardless. If I'm competing, if I have extra assets, I at least want to grab them and stash in the future. I don't know. I know a lot of people just kind of hate the Jags and don't want to buy them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I want to talk about here. I like what you guys are saying about Trevor Lawrence. While he has disappointed, from like the Andrew Luck comps we were making, when he was drafted, he's still been okay. He's had multiple QB1 seasons. He's been solid for fantasy, and especially this year. I mean, I believe the last 5 weeks straight, he's finished at least as a top 15 quarterback in 6-point scoring. If my memory serves me correctly, he's been like borderline in QB1. He's been right there because the Jaguars defense is terrible and he has to throw the ball in order to try to help, like maybe win them a game or two. Like that's what Trevor Lawrence has to do at this point. He has to truck the ball downfield. And the thing is, fantasy football is a lot about perspective. You can take advantage of perspective a lot in fantasy football, especially in Dynasty, with the way we view long-term assets. And I feel like Trevor Lawrence is one of those players where you can take advantage big time. Like you guys have been saying, like disappointment with Trevor Lawrence is big, but at the same time, he's been okay. So if you can take advantage of that perception that he's disappointed majorly, you might be able to get some value with him. Like you said, if you can send a first or random player for Trevor Lawrence in a Superflex league, that's totally worth it. But another player I like from this Jaguar, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is obviously a monster.
Obvious,
All
yeah.
three of us love him. But Evan Ingram, I really, really like with Christian Kirk now being out. Unfortunately, Christian Kirk went down with this injury this past week. But I talked about it, Jagger. We made a short video, or I recorded, you edited it, and I was talking about Christian Kirk as a must bench because when Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are on the field together, they battle for the same targets, like those short intermediate routes, a lot over the middle. And now with Christian Kirk out of the way, Evan Ingram has that role all to himself. So we're going to see the Evan Ingram we saw last year where it's like at least like 6 to 10 targets a game and being a monster fantasy producer, even without scoring an immense amount of touchdowns. Like I think Evan Ingram's a monster rest of the season for fantasy, probably like a top 5-ish tight end.
Yeah. I know Evan Ingram in my head. I have a lot of Evan Ingram rosters where he's my tight end too. And if he's my tight end too, he is, or even my tight end one. If I have a good tight, like I have no run roster, I have Tucker Kraft and Evan Ingram. Tucker Kraft's in my tight end slot. Evan Ingram's just a flex for me. He's just a wide
Yeah.
receiver, guys. Like, I do not consider him a tight end whatsoever. They just use him as a slot. So, to me, it's a buy up Jaguar season. If you're a competitor, go get Evan Ingram. Everyone else, if you're a rebuilder, those are really good buys. Next, the faller. When I say a faller, I wanted to bring him up. This isn't just falling. This is Shadow Realm, guys. This is gone. I've talked. It's Jover. Whatever word that you want to use, it's Dunzo. Will Levis. I'll start with a question to you. Why would you start Will Levis now? You can lose in a fun fashion with Mason Rudolph. Calvin Ridley has fun. He's not going to complain. He gets his tax-free money and 100 yards every game. He can have his Carmelo stats, but they can still lose. Or you could put Will Levis out there, and then you're putting your franchise in Shadow Realm where no one wants to be there. Like, would you put Will Levis back in at this point?
No, you're not going to play Will Levis. And I think that one of the biggest things that you look at, Brian Callahan coming in and attempting to implement his offensive scheme. The reason why a guy like Mason Rudolph finds himself in this position is because he'll do what the coach asks him to do. He understands what needs to be done in the offense, where people are supposed to be, how that's supposed to function. It's kind of like how Andy Dalton in Carolina, when he first came in, he's a professional and he got players up to speed. And so if you've got a quarterback that is just a mess back there, you're not allowing your system to be implemented. You're not allowing other players to develop. Nothing is working there. And that's the biggest thing with Will Levis was, given how he was playing, nothing was able to be functioning properly. And so at least Mason Rudolph gives you a borderline baseline level of Mason Rudolph's probably a top 40-ish, top 45-ish quarterback in the NFL. And sometimes that's what you have to live with, as opposed to a rookie or a second year player that's actively losing football games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I'll add on to that, like we were talking about Anthony Richardson, we mentioned him a little bit. Like, it's so tough, and he's been a really big conversation because Shane Steichen recently said we're evaluating everything when asked if he's a starter next week. The thing is, you got to stick to Anthony Richardson because he was your first round pick. Like, he was
and you knew he was developmental.
Yeah, and you knew he's development. Like, he's your guy. Like, there's a lot more commitment there. Will Levis was a second round pick. Like, this isn't like a top 5 pick you spent. You didn't trade up to get him. Like, this was just a guy that fell in the draft and you happened to get him in the second round. Like, it isn't really a massive, massive loss to keep him on the bench. Obviously, burning second round pick is never fun, but it's not like you spent your franchise on this guy. Like, you can get rid of him and not have the embarrassment that he's proven every week with not just the interceptions, not just the fumbles, not just a ton of sacks, but the pictures he's created on the internet now has gone viral for, like, all the messy plays. It's just been it's been disastrous for Will Levis. So I agree with you, Jeff, that Mason Rudolph should probably be the starter moving forward.
With the exception of last game where he's like, I ran out of breath or whatever. That's, to be honest, I think that happens more than we think. I just think he's sent him to PR school. You can't be saying that, dude. You can't say that, man. Oh baby, what is you doing? Like, with the exception of that, I think that, like, Will Levis has just looked terrible worse. I don't I don't know what. Like, Anthony Richardson's been bad, but Will Levis has been. They were talking about making a Will Levis calendar because of how ugly it is. It's just some nasty work, man. Like, I'm happy that he got the bag from Mayo and all that stuff. I hope he invested in a car lot in Kentucky, like they do, or something.
Because it's going to be playing golf with some important people around Kentucky for a while. So
exactly. Like, it's bad, and I'm sorry for anyone I said, well, at cost he's fine, because I didn't think it'd be that bad. Now knowing, here's how bad it is, Jeff. I really thought about this. This is not a great QB class, but I do think there's some depth. I'd rather have Dylan Gabriel 10 times out of 10 over Will Levis. Like, Dylan Gabriel's like 5'10" and all right, but you know what? He at least doesn't make the worst decision every play. All right.
The thing that got me as a prospect, especially the narratives around Will Levis coming into the draft, he was never any good in college. Like, it was one of those that you watch him and you're like, I remember him at Penn State, and you following and you're like, man, this guy should be beating Sean Clifford like soundly to be the quarterback given his physical tools, and he didn't. And then he went to Kentucky, and every time that there was a big moment, he looked exactly like the Will Levis that we've come to expect. There was so many, remember, I feel a couple times where they were going into playing Georgia at like 5-1 or something like that, and you would get a little bit excited, like maybe they'll give Georgia a run, and then it would be 27-0, be like be by the end of the first quarter because it's Will Levis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Hutch.
I mean, just like I completely agree with you, Jeff, that what the guy we saw in college is the same guy we're seeing in the NFL. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I could go on, it's a laundry list of how many things that are wrong with him as a prospect. We got to get through the rest of the show, but I'll just say one last thing to recap the Will Levis jokes. That, you know, how when you watch a player like Josh Allen, right? You're like, you know, he can run, he can chuck it like 70 yards downfield. You're always waiting, like, when's this play going to be a touchdown? Like, this play's going to be a touchdown. When we watch Will Levis, it's like, when is he going to throw the pick? When is he going to lose the football? When is he going to create a meme? It's ridiculous. But yeah,
And
it's unbelievable.
Hutch, to give you some old man sage advice, is you watch more football, you could see it in a quarterback's eyes when they can't see the field sometimes, especially if you look at it. Will Levis's tape, I'm like, you could have Ray Charles back there. Ray Charles with the biggest arm on the planet. And he's got he gets the happy feet, you know, where
He
like,
does.
oh,
He
I'm
does.
panicked. I'm going to freak out. You could just see the freak out. And like, I just feel like he has like whoever's inside out, like people are in his brain are just freaking out.
It's all the
As
alert, the red alarm. Yeah.
so as a fan, like when you're invested in a situation, there's going to be fear on every snap. And the where's the fear? Is the fear on your quarterback taking the snap, or is the fear on the guy that you're going? Like if my team is going against Patrick Mahomes, every snap I'm like, oh man, like it's coming, here it comes.
Yeah.
If my team is going against Will Levis, I'm like, man, it's coming, here it comes.
No, exactly though. Exactly.
And
Oh
we'll
my
keep
gosh.
this next
Yeah.
one quick because like I kind of already preluded to a riser, Calvin Ridley, guys. And with that being said, sell Calvin Ridley. Like he's like, I mean, sell him to a contender. I think I think if he's a contender buy at this point, you could probably get for a second round pick. And I think Mason Rudolph is capable of getting Calvin Ridley the ball. I'm not saying he's going to constantly have these 100-yard games in one quarter, but I don't think we're going to have him crying at the end of the game because he can't even get the ball anymore. I don't think that's going to happen. Go out there and get Calvin Ridley, and that's enough Titans talk because we got to talk about a worse team, the Jets. Like, we knew
Yay.
the Titans were kind of bad, but like we thought the Jets were going to be somebody, right? With that being said, anyone but Aaron Rodgers and probably Devontae Adams is a buy. If you really think about it, and I mean, even if you're a contender, it's never bad to go out and go get good young players. I don't think anyone just like, I'm a contender. I went and bought Garrett Wilson. I'm so stupid. Like, you're probably going to be good at some point. You're probably going to be good going out and getting Brees Hall. Braylon Allen's pretty cheap. Third round pick for Brandon Allen, that's probably all right. So, Jeff, Devontae Adams is the real question here. What are you doing with Devontae Adams in the future?
You're hoping it turns around and it looks like vintage Devontae Adams right now because,
Yeah.
when we did the Sunday, I think I mentioned it in the Sunday start sit, but I know I mentioned it last week a couple times. Of the thing with Todd Downing was at first I don't know if excited was the right word, but they were at least giving the ball to the right players. And you look at that Pittsburgh game, and it was like the targets were Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Brees Hall almost exclusively, and the rushes were Brees Hall almost exclusively. And you were like, okay, you're giving it to your three best players that are considerably better than the rest of your team. And then they go out against New England, and it's like they just were like, well, we got to spread the ball out, and we got to give Braylon Allen work to get him going. And I said in my column today that somebody needs to let the Jets know that you need to win the game before you play your backups. And I don't know. They were doing that against New England. So
That's like you said Todd Downing. when they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett, I'm like, man, Todd Downey can disappoint me in some more classically, like I guess more appealing ways.
Bad
Yeah.
OTs do that. You start to believe, and then they pull the rug out, and they think they're smart, and we're gonna scheme up plays for Jeremy Rucker and Braylon Allen instead of Brees Hall.
Hutch, would you buy Devontae Adams if you're a contender? As I say, it's not a bad idea buying good players. I don't think Devontae's washed. He doesn't look washed.
No.
He doesn't play like a washed player. Would you buy him at this point?
I'd agree with you, Jagger. This morning, Monday, I wanted to watch Devontae Adams' his last couple of games with the Jets, how he's looked. The fantasy production hasn't really been there like we wanted to, but he's looked great. He's getting open. He's running good routes. He is maybe not the Devontae Adams he was like 5 years ago, but he's still a really, really good player. And it's just like good players usually win out throughout a season or throughout Dynasty. Usually they win out, and I think this is a good opportunity to buy Devontae Adams because the price is just it's low right now. Like Jeff
Probably
was
a second.
Probably a second. Jeff was mentioning like selling Devontae Adams is just probably not an option right now, even if you're selling to a contender, because it's just like the price can really only go up from here. I don't see where it goes down, right? It's hard to imagine this price going much worse because he's not washed. If he was washed, that's a whole different story, but he's not. So I see Devontae Adams as a good buy if you can get him for like a second or a second and a third, something like that. I think that's a good buy.
Yeah. I know I have contending rosters and I have Brandon Ayuk on them and stuff. And there comes a point where you do have to make sacrifices where you can't just be like, I'm 8-0, let's tear it down. Yeah, because I lost Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
So
he wasn't helping you get there anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So if I could sell Brandon Ayuk and get Devontae Adams in a first, I'm not smash declining. Let's put it that way. I would probably cry myself to sleep doing that. But at least I know I can get a first. There's a couple of wide receivers that may be all right, or at least me, I can get a running back. I can get a player with the first, and then Devontae, I don't think he's washed. I could probably sell him for a second again or something, later if he has a couple of games. So sorry if you're a Jets fan. Sorry if you're a Titans fan. We ended on some depressing news there. I'm a Patriots fan, and we don't expect anything. So welcome to the club.
Oh my!
We'll have Hutch on the rest of the week, guys. As always, hit the like and subscribe button. I'm Jagger May. That is Jeff Bell, and that's Hutchinson Brown. Love you, and we'll see you next time.